Sounds of marching boots and the triumphant, often discordant blare of a brass band were the defining soundtrack of early 1970s Uganda. The nation was held in the iron, yet unpredictable, grip of Field Marshal Idi Amin Dada, a man whose official title was a theatrical performance in itself. His Excellency President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada VC DSO MC, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea, and infamously Conqueror of the British Empire CBE. The grandiosity of these titles was inversely proportional to the terror and chaos his regime inflicted upon the populace. Amidst this terrifying martial pomp, a striking figure named Sarah Kyolaba moved with a captivating, professional grace. Sarah was no ordinary civilian. She was a performer. She belonged to the band attached to the chillingly named Revolutionary Suicide Mechanized Regiment of the Ugandan Army. Her role was not one of war, but spectacle, a dazzling array of highly choreographed dance routines that brought color and a veneer of controlled excitement to the regime's public displays. It was this prominent and dangerous association that earned her the indelible, haunting nickname that would define her life, Suicide Sarah. The name was both a tribute to her professional home and a dark prophecy of the high-stakes world she inhabited. Her performances naturally brought her into the view of the regime's ultimate patron. Idi Amin, a man of immense physical bulk and unpredictable, bombastic temperament, was immediately captivated by Sarah's youth, vitality, and skill. Her elevation from military dancer to the object of the president's public and private affection was swift, dramatic, and irreversible. The relationship culminated in a wedding so lavish that it became a global headline, cementing Sarah's status not just as a wife, but as Amin's undisputed favorite. The ceremony, held on August 1, 1975, was designed not as a personal rite but as a geopolitical statement, coinciding with the end of the Organization of African Unity, OAU, summit, which Amin was chairing. The venue was the exclusive Jaja Villas Hotel in Munyonyo, Kampala. Every detail of the wedding was tailored for maximum political impact and opulence. The guest list featured African heads of state, including President Siad Barre of Somalia and President Jafar el-Nimiri of the Sudan. However, the most sensational attendance was that of Yasser Arafat, the leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, who served as the best man. The pairing was a signal of Amin's alliances with international pariahs and revolutionaries, a defiant thumbing of his nose at the West, particularly the former colonial power, Britain. Behind the public spectacle, the wedding demonstrated Amin's chilling power. Accounts detail the frenetic, rushed preparations, which were organized on a mere 3 days' notice under direct presidential command. A wedding gown had to be secured from a London design house and flown in via DHL. The cost of the banquet was reported to be the equivalent of a staggering £2 million. For the iconic moment of cutting the massive 3-tier wedding cake, the field marshal bypassed a mere knife, instead drawing his ceremonial sword, a clear sign that even domestic bliss was a military affair. However, the foundation of this glamorous new life was built on tragedy. Sarah had been in a relationship with a popular musician and fellow band member, Jesse Gita Kazarivu, who was the father of her first child. When Amin took a proprietary interest, he claimed the child as his own and ordered the birth announced on national television. Gita, who had dared to stand up to the dictator over the woman he loved, subsequently disappeared, a victim of the lethal consequences of challenging presidential will. Sarah Kyolaba became Mrs. Idi Amin, a position of unparalleled luxury and immense, terrifying peril. The years of rule were marked by rampant human rights abuses and economic ruin, earning Amin the moniker the Butcher of Uganda. By 1979, his disastrous invasion of Tanzania triggered a full-scale counter-invasion by Tanzanian troops and Ugandan exiles. Amin's regime crumbled swiftly, and he fled the country. Sarah Kyolaba, separated from her husband in the chaos, followed the dictator into his initial exile in Libya. The journey soon took them to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the place of his permanent sanctuary. Yet, The gilded cage of exile was no substitute for the opulence of the State House, and the relationship fractured. In 1982, Sarah made a definitive break, divorcing Amin and beginning her long, circuitous journey west. She first sought refuge in Germany, where she claimed asylum, briefly working as a lingerie model, a remarkable, transient occupation for a former First Lady. This life, too, proved temporary, and her path eventually led her to her ultimate and highly ironic destination. The United Kingdom, the country Amin had expelled thousands of citizens from and publicly ridiculed. The stage was set for the final and most improbable act of deception. The London Sarah Kyolaba arrived in was a far cry from the theatrical grandeur of Kampala or the guarded opulence of Jeddah. Here, she was merely one face in a city of millions, stripped of her titles, protection, and automatic wealth. It was a complete metamorphosis, from the center of national power to the margins of a working-class community. The former First Lady, accustomed to command, now had to learn to operate within the constraints of British bureaucracy and commerce. Her attempts to build a life in London were marked by small-scale, deeply pragmatic enterprise. She settled in the eastern and northern parts of the city, areas like West Ham and Tottenham, locales far removed from the high society circles expected of a former presidential spouse. The records reveal her determined effort to establish legitimacy and self-sufficiency. Her most significant venture was Krishna's restaurant in West Ham, a local cafe she ran between 1997 and 1998. The business required the daily, grinding effort of a small-time caterer, managing staff, ordering stock, and keeping local custom. This attempt at an ordinary life was undermined by her difficulty in conforming to the stringent legal and health standards of the British regulatory environment. In 1997, the business ran afoul of municipal regulations. The council's health inspectors found conditions so poor that she was cited and convicted for health violations. The shocking details, which included allowing cockroaches and mice to overrun the premises, provided a moment of dark spectacle for the British press. The former First Lady was found guilty of being an unfit cafe owner, highlighting her profound fall from grace. She was reportedly able to avoid a custodial sentence for this offense, but the restaurant was closed shortly thereafter. Undeterred, she pivoted to a different form of personal service, operating a hair salon in Tottenham. On the surface, Sarah was a working immigrant, struggling to maintain a modest existence in a foreign city, paying rent and utility bills like any other small business owner. The transition was profound, forcing the once untouchable suicide Sarah to confront the tedious reality of taxes, forms, and local authority oversight. It was this very system of local authority oversight that she decided to exploit. While working and operating her businesses, Sarah also made a key financial application to the local council, a claim for local government housing benefits. This program is a cornerstone of the UK's social safety net, designed to prevent homelessness and provide subsidized housing costs for those in genuine financial distress. The system is means-tested, meaning eligibility rests entirely on the claimant's documented lack of income and, critically, a near-total absence of financial assets. By applying for these benefits, Sarah Kyolaba was entering into a contractual obligation with the British government, asserting under penalty of law that her financial status matched the criteria for poverty or low income. She submitted official application forms that explicitly required a full disclosure of all bank accounts, savings, and investments. She successfully enrolled in the system, receiving regular benefit payments intended to cover her housing expenses. This act was built entirely on an assumption of truthfulness, an assumption that she knew to be false, setting the stage for the definitive act of her life in London, the calculated con. The deception executed by the former First Lady was not one of geopolitical intrigue or military maneuvering, but of mundane, calculated welfare fraud. It was a con against the administrative heart of the nation that had given her safe harbor. The core of the fraud centered on a clear, premeditated act of concealment. While Sarah Kyolaba was filling out the mandatory forms for the housing benefit, she was simultaneously maintaining a hidden financial life. The investigation later revealed that she had substantial sums, specifically over £400,000, held in various undisclosed bank accounts. The presence of these savings categorically disqualified her from receiving the housing benefit payments she was claiming. By actively failing to disclose these significant assets, she deliberately and criminally manipulated the system. The irony of the situation was immense. This woman, who had once been connected to atrocities on a vast scale and enjoyed wealth equivalent to millions of pounds, was caught by a team of municipal fraud investigators. Her downfall was not orchestrated by MI5 or Interpol, but by the local council's Benefits Compliance Unit, a team of accountants and clerks tasked with rooting out petty deception within the welfare system. This bureaucratic, unglamorous process of cross-checking bank records against income declarations proved to be the Achilles heel of the dictator's former spouse. The deception amounted to a sustained breach of trust. For a period, she received funds from the British Exchequer, money paid by the very taxpayers she had fraudulently misled, while simultaneously maintaining a hidden private reserve. The authorities determined that she had been paid benefits she was not legally entitled to receive, making her entirely liable for repayment and prosecution. The legal proceedings followed, and the case was brought before the British courts. In 1999, Sarah Kyolaba was officially convicted of fraud. The specific charge was illegally claiming state benefits through the deliberate concealment of financial assets. The court order that followed did not just mete out punishment, but also detailed the required restitution. She was formally ordered to repay the entirety of the money she had fraudulently received from the British government. This order was the definitive legal confirmation of the con. The conviction instantly catapulted the story from a local court report to international news. The defendant's background was a feast for the media, generating a firestorm of negative press. Headlines across the world sensationalized the absurd juxtaposition. The woman once known as the butcher of Uganda's wife, or the flamboyant suicide Sarah, convicted in a London court for being a petty welfare cheat. Media commentary fixated on the sheer audacity. A woman who had lived in the gilded palaces of an African dictator was now stealing from the social safety net of the former colonial power. Despite the gravity of the offense against the taxpayer, the court opted for a non-custodial sentence, likely involving community service or a suspended sentence, provided the repayment was managed. Her public profile, however, was permanently scarred. The scandal defined her life in exile. It was a bizarre, final narrative arc. The powerful dancer, the dictator's favorite, the lingerie model in Germany, ultimately becoming a footnote in the history of British welfare fraud. Sarah Kyolaba faded from the headlines after the repayment order, retiring to a quiet life in North London where she defended her late husband's memory until her death in 2015.